Urs, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
What brings you to the World Future Energy Summit 2017?
The Emirates, the Gulf region as such, is a very innovative area, and of course, me representing mainly the topic of e-mobility, coming from ABB, one of the leaders in that area, is more or less mandatory to be here on at least a yearly basis to see what all the interesting developments in the area are doing and where we're going next.
You're predominantly focused on electric vehicle infrastructure.
Yes.
How has the uptake been globally so far?
We have to say it's regionally different. So we, for example, see Northern Europe, countries like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, being very advanced. The uptake is very good, partially driven by government incentives, but also the people start liking driving in electric cars. So it generates a good movement within those countries. We have similar situations in China, where especially the government policy and the whole situation in the urban areas mandates to look into that direction. We have other areas where we still have a lot of potential. Some areas in Europe, also the area here in the Middle East has still a lot of development, but I see here at the fair a lot of good thoughts and the good initiatives being started.
Is this a chicken-egg situation? Do you need the cars first or do you need the infrastructure first?
Okay, my view is clearly that this is driven by the cars, especially for the private use of vehicles. I mean, ultimately you make a personal decision to go for an electric car. You want to choose from various brands. You're used to choose your color and your type of car you like, and at the moment I feel it's not enough choice given. And we really need, and it's a good trend, all the major car OEMs in the world have announced their line of electric vehicle coming in the next 3 years. And I believe that this ability to choose your electric vehicle that you like, rather than have just a few to pick from, this will ultimately drive. From an infrastructure side, I think we will be able to catch up very, very quickly if we see in certain areas, certain cities, demand for infrastructure. That's usually something that can pick up very quickly.
So the Chevy Volt is just one Motor Trend Car of the Year, which would strongly suggest that there is going to be an increase in the speed of uptake of electric vehicles. Can that infrastructure keep up with that uptake of vehicles?
Yes, it can.
How so?
Usually the availability of power is in, let's say, in the US, where the Chevy is coming from, or in Europe, in those areas that I mentioned, Northern Europe, is usually quite good. And so all you then need is basically to develop the sites and to install the infrastructure in those sites. However, and this is where I partially have to agree with you, just to put infrastructure on site and connect it to the grid, that's not really solving the issue. What you need are companies who are professionally offering then charging as a service to the drivers. When I look at the chargers that ABB has installed all over the world, we are now having about 5,000 chargers in 50 countries installed. I would probably say about 60–70% of them are professionally managed by one of my customers and offered as a service to the driver. You can find the charger. When you find it, you know how to use it, and when you use it, you know how much it will cost you. There is a large amount, I would probably assume 1/3, 30–35%, that are not correctly managed to generate a service for the driver. So they're standing there, they're connected, they're fully operational, but nobody finds them. If you find them, you don't know how to use it, and if you use it, you have no clue if and what and how much it's going to cost them. So this operational element is often forgotten in the question car or infrastructure. So we're taking care of the infrastructure, the car OEMs are taking care of the cars. This is going on, but what is in many cases and in many countries missing are professional, what we call charge point operators.
So the monetization of charging is what will drive infrastructure?
It is definitely important that in the electric vehicle infrastructure, people start thinking about business models. You know, putting in an investment into something, that's always nice, and you might even get subsidies from your government. But sooner or later, you would like to have a return on that investment. So you need to have a very strong thinking about what is your business model that you're doing with that. And the the early movers, we see startup companies all over Europe who were thinking about that and are putting in initial investment to start developing these business models, and they're, in the meantime, quite advanced. What we also see now in terms of this commercial business model is charging as an additional service, auxiliary service to the main business plan of a company. For example, we're in Europe now working with Lidl and other large retailers. Their main business is to be a retailer, but they found out that it's interesting for them to put electric vehicle charging in their parking lots as a service for their customers who go shopping. So all these business developments are currently in development. It's very interesting for us to enable these kind of discussions.
How about the issue about infrastructure beyond the chargers, so the grid connections?
Yes.
You're looking at a lot higher drains in certain areas that you perhaps wouldn't have had them before. How do you manage that?
Of course, there is another large investment area for upgrading existing grids, make them more stable, make them more interactive, make them smart. You know, smart grid is the big topic out there to manage these loads. It's very clear that the e-mobility, if it starts picking up in an area, it starts to create a new demand for electricity that was not there before. So you somehow need to be able to manage that properly, and one of the key requirements is that the chargers are connected. That as an operator, but ultimately also as a grid company, you're able to set the power levels that should be used at what time of the day, so you don't have like the dinner cooking and the car charging being competition on the same grid. So the connectivity piece in electric vehicle infrastructure is very important, if not to say it's mandatory.
And presumably that then feeds into the personal energy storage solution that people are now starting to talk about.
Energy storage might be personal in a more local environment for your own house and where you have your car, or then a little bit further for communities or for whole grid. This is definitely a topic that is very closely linked to EV charging. The third element that is usually charging, storage, is renewable energy. Solar, wind power, which unfortunately has the characteristic that it goes up and down. You know, if the sun is shining, you have a lot. If the wind is blowing, you have a lot. So if you can then combine energy storage into this, or if you can combine all three, you have a renewable source that can fill energy storage, and you have on the other side then an electric charger who you can manage. When energy is available, then you can charge. So these are the three elements that if you put them together and combine it with connectivity, you get a nice package for the future.
I never thought I'd say this, but it sounds like cars are going to be baseload energy supply.
That's what, for example, in Japan, it's called vehicle to grid. That's something that is already in a strong implementation phase, and we see that now in many requirements where the car battery is becoming accessible for the grid companies to operate and to manage the grid load. So that is very well possible. I mean, you're looking the BMWs and the Nissan Leafs, the early cars, they had rather smaller batteries. Now you see a Tesla coming with 100 kilowatt hour battery. That's a lot of energy. That's a big energy storage. And of course, to have that available to stabilize the grid or to do demand response is a very interesting field.
And where do you think this will ultimately go?
One of the trends we see at the moment in the whole electric vehicle charging is the bus charging. You know, everything started 5 years ago with private vehicles, and people understood how the technology works, how you can charge. The battery technology is evolving, and with that suddenly came the point where bus manufacturers started realizing, okay, now the performance of the battery is good enough that we can equip bus. And the buses are at the moment on the rise. I don't think that there is one city in Europe that can allow currently not to have a plan how they're going to turn their current bus fleets into electric buses. And this is an easier decision to make because you can plan it, you have a schedule, you know where the bus is going, and you can plan the charging, when it happened. Also for the grid companies, everything becomes much more plannable. And one of the things that I see in the immediate future is that the uptake of the private cars might take a little bit slower because it's an individual decision. You know, when you're ready to go, that chicken and egg scenario that we had before is still playing. But for the electric buses, this can be a political decision, a government decision, a bus operator decision to make it happen in a more controlled environment. So that's the e-bus, the rise of the e-bus application is definitely something we will see. On the car side, the private car side, what we will see, in my opinion, is the electrification of fleets, speaking taxis, speaking maintenance vehicles of companies, and then only in the third phase will be the real pickup of private cars, especially when then, as announced by many car OEMs, fantastic new electric vehicles are being introduced.
It's a bright future.
It's a very bright future.
Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.